Welcome to Professor Ortlieb's Blue Book Podcast, a series of podcasts designed to teach law students the basics of legal citation using the Blue Book. In this episode, we're going to look at citing secondary authorities, in particular, looking at Blue Book Rules 15 and 16. Rule 15 for books, Rule 16 for periodicals. Turning first to Blue Book Rule 15, this is the rule that dictates how we do cites for books. So this applies to books, reports, and any other non-periodic materials. The basic formula consists of 6 elements: the author, the title of the book, the page where you found the information that you're citing to, the edition of the book, possibly the publisher, and the date. The next few examples are going to be taken from these 3 books you see pictured here. You may want to do a screen grab or look at this slide on the side as we go through the next few examples so you can see which information I'm taking from the cover. Looking first at the author. Unlike many other conventions and many other citation conventions, authors in a Blue Book cite are listed by first and last name with the first name first. Where a book has 2 authors, they're listed in the same order as the title page. Other citation conventions might have you put these authors in alphabetical order, but that's not the case with the Blue Book. List them in the same order with the same names or initials as you find on the title page. Where a book has 3 or more authors, you're going to need to list just the first author plus et al. To replace the other author names. As a side note, sometimes books are part of multi-volume sets. Where that is the case, the volume number will actually come before the first author's name. The next component of your cite is the title. You're going to give the full title of the book as it appears on the title page. You're going to capitalize according to Rule 8, but omit subtitles unless otherwise relevant. Do not abbreviate words or omit articles like a, an, or the in the title. And remember to underline or italicize the title. One of the things you may notice is that a lot of the white pages examples in your Blue Book use large and small caps to indicate the title. In general, we're supposed to keep all of our titles underlined or italicized when writing in ordinary memoranda or court documents. That said, Blue Book has relaxed its rules a little bit and now allows you to use large and small caps where it's stylistically appropriate. Here are some examples of how you might build out the author and title of the 3 books that I gave you in the second slide. The next component of your cite is the page number. Just as we did with citations to cases, just as we did with citations to statutes, you're going to want to give your reader enough information to find exactly the point that you're relying on. So, like our pin cite pages for our case opinions, we're going to give the specific page of the book we found the information we want to call our reader's attention to. It's listed simply after the title of the book. It's not italicized, it's not underlined, and it's not set off by a comma. It's simply placed after a space after the title. If listing the page number alone might be confusing because maybe the title ends in numerals, you can separate the page information from the title by adding a comma at the end of the title of the book and adding an at before the page number. So here you have the example, Bob Smith, The Tea Party Express, 2008 to 2016, might look confusing if you put a number after it. So I'm going to put a comma after my 2016, then at 208. Note that I did turn off the underscore before I put my comma after the title of the book. The last component of your citation to a book is actually going to be in a parenthetical, and this is going to include your edition, maybe your publisher, and your date. In general, you want to cite to the most recent edition of a book, unless an earlier edition would be more helpful or authoritative. If the book is on its first edition, do not include the edition. Now I keep saying maybe the publisher, and this is why. Include the publisher information only where the book has been previously published by a different publishing house. The last piece of your parenthetical is going to be the date of publication. That date should appear in parentheses even if the title contains the date of the book. Here's how those 3 books sites are built out. You'll notice that the Sloan book is in its 6th edition. All of these books are by the same original publisher as the first edition, so no publishing house is listed. Finally, note that that last book, Joan Rockland's An Advocate Persuades, is in its first edition from 2016. Therefore, the only information in the parenthetical is that publication date of 2016. There are many books that actually have special forms under the Blue Book. Whenever you're citing to dictionaries, encyclopedias, including legal encyclopedias, such as the AmJur or the CJS, you're going to need to find the special format and rule within Rule 15. Other books with special forms include the Federalist Papers, the Manual for Complex Litigation, the Bible, the works of Shakespeare, and the Blue Book itself. Because they're so prevalent in first-year research projects, I'd like to take a moment to talk a little bit more about encyclopedias and show you how they're a little bit different than your regular book sites. Here's an example of a citation from the American Jurisprudence, or the AmJur. The citation is made up of first the number 1 to indicate that this was from volume 1 of this encyclopedia set. AmJur 2D is the abbreviation for the American Jurisprudence. Act of God is the specific topic that I was looking at, and Section 1 is the section of that topic that I was looking at. 1999 is the publication date. Notice that the same spacing rules that we learned under Rule 6 that we used for citation sentences, for cases, and for statutes still applies here. You'll find a space before and after the section symbol, and the abbreviation for AmJur second has spacing in it because Am and Jur are not single adjacent capital letters that can be closed up. Here's an example of a citation using CJS, or Corpus Juris Secundum. This shows the reader that you took your article or your piece of article from volume 43 of the CJS, under the topic Infants, and in the subsection 2 of Infants, published in 1967. Going back to that spacing issue that we talked about in the first example, here in this second example, you'll notice that CJS has no extra spacing in between it because they are all single adjacent capital letters. We close those up and take out any extra spaces. Like statutes and like cases, there are short form citations available for books. I've departed from our earlier examples and came up with a different one here for this chart. A full cite of a book, again, is going to be your author, your full title of the book, the page you found the information, and your edition and date parenthetical at the end. Like cases, books can take an id form. An id form is appropriate where the previous cite was to the same authority and no other authorities have been cited since. Id can be used on its own if the citation is to the same page as the previous cite. But where, as here, the page is changing from the prior cite, you'll use id, at, and the new page number. Instead of the medium form that we learned with cases involving a shortened case name and the volume, reporter name, at page number that we learned for cases, instead with books we use supra. Supra is never appropriate for a case cite or a statute cite, but it is appropriate for books. So this is the cite form that you will use where you've cited this book in full previously, but since your last cite to this book, you maybe have cited a few other authorities. If you want to return your reader's attention back to that Barker book, you'll use the first author's last name, Barker, comma, supra, all underlined, but not the comma that follows the supra, and then space, at, and then the page numbers. Here I've given you a page span to show you the conventions we learned for page spans with cases still apply with books. Let's turn to Blue Book Rule 16, dealing with periodicals. This rule applies to all periodical materials, including law reviews, journals, newspaper articles, opinions, and annotations. The basic components are very similar to other sites that you've seen in the past. They're kind of like a hybrid between a book and a case site. Those basic components are the author, the title of the article, the journal volume number, the abbreviated name of the journal, the first page where the article begins within the journal, the pin site page or pages where you want to draw your reader's attention to, and finally, the date of publication. Here's an example of a site that might come up from an article that was published in the DePaul Journal for Social Justice. Let's break it down a bit. The author component of your citation will follow the same rules as books, and that is first name, last name of one author. If it's two authors, you'll have both names separated by an ampersand and in the same order as they are credited on the article. If it's three or more authors, it'll once again be the first author followed by et al. I have my comma in here, and then I wrote my title, Kissing Girls and Making Them Cry. We know from our blue pages that all titles of articles and books must be underlined or italicized. So here you see Kissing Girls and Making Them Cry is underlined. The next component of our site is where we depart from the conventions that we saw with books and start to craft a site that looks a little bit more like our case sites. All journals have multiple volumes to them, just like our reporter system does. So here we're going to put the journal volume number first before the name of the journal. Now this, I said, is the DePaul Journal for Social Justice. Where did I get this abbreviation from? Well, unlike the reporters that were easily found, those abbreviations were easily found in table T1 when we looked for our jurisdiction. When it comes to journal names, we have to be a little bit more creative and use tables T10 for jurisdiction abbreviations and geographical location abbreviations, combined with some other common words used within journal titles in table T13. Now, in prior editions of the Blue Book, the authors of the Blue Book and the editors of the Blue Book actually attempted to try to include every single journal that was out there. So you would simply look up the name of your journal, and it was only in some offhand situations where you might have to find or craft your own abbreviation. Well, journals have flourished. We have so many more of them, especially now that we have online journals available to us. So you're going to have to craft your own abbreviations using tables T10, T13, and there's two parts of T13 as well. So the first thing I'd look up is DePaul, because there is a section, the first section of table T13 does give the abbreviations for institutions. When you look up DePaul in that table, you'll find that it actually doesn't exist. Well, they've also given us a rule for that, and if you look at the beginning of T13, it will tell you where your institution is not listed. You're not to abbreviate it at all. You're just to use it in full. So DePaul is not listed. It means it has no further abbreviation, so I'm just going to write DePaul. Journal is J period. Now, do be careful. Just like we've learned previously, here journal can actually have a couple of different types of abbreviations, so make sure you pick the correct one for your purposes. Social is SOC period, and justice is JUST period. Notice that we do have the same rules with spacing and abbreviations here, so you have to spread each of these out. 45 refers to the page of this volume where this article began, so that needs to go in just like the first page of our cases. I put a comma in, and then I put my specific pin site page number, which in this case was 68. The year of publication goes in parentheses, much like the year of a decision goes in parentheses, or the year of publication of a book goes into parentheses. One of the other things I do want to call your attention to is when we talked about books, I said large and small caps are now allowed under the 20th edition of the Blue Book. This is actually the area you're most likely to use large and small caps in a fine manner, and that's specifically with this journal name. You'll notice that almost every example that you look at, including everything you see listed in T13, will use large and small caps to write out those abbreviations. You may use those under the new 20th edition of the Blue Book, even in a memoranda or something being filed with the court. Just like everything else we've looked at, journal articles too also have short form citation available. An id cite is appropriate where you've cited this authority in full previously, and in fact your prior cite is to the same authority. Id is fine. Once again, if you change your page number, you need to put at and the new page number after your id. If it's the same page as your prior cite, id on its own is sufficient. Like books, the medium form of a cite to a journal article is going to have this super format. So again, use your author's name, Porgy, comma, supra, underlined, comma, and at your new page number. One other note here, a supracite to an article or book written by more than one author will have both authors listed prior to the supra. Now something else can happen. Sometimes you might cite more than one article by the same author. When that happens, you need to add another piece of information between the author's name and the supra, and that's simply some shortened form of the title of the article you want to draw your reader's attention to, and it's up to you what you want to put in for that short form, so long as it's clear to the reader what you're talking about and they can find that authority. That's sufficient. You have a fair amount of discretion here. One final note, I did want to call your attention to a couple extra features that might go into a citation in the context of ALR annotations. You'll recall that annotations are articles written for the American Law Reports by an expert in the field that gathers up cases and gives some interpretation of those cases and some summary of law and some very specific questions across multiple jurisdictions. Where you're citing to an annotation, you're going to add the word annotation after the author's name. You'll find similar conventions and similar requirements for student written material, such as a note that's written for a law review. You'll have to put note in there. Op-eds similarly need to be noted as op-eds. Always check Rule 16 for those little special requirements. The name of this annotation, all underlined or italicized. In this case, I'm using underlines. And then finally, I include my volume, my ALR abbreviation, whichever volume or whichever series of the ALRs I'm using. And then here I put in my first page of this annotation, which was 563. If I wanted to call my reader's attention to a specific page, within this annotation, I would put a comma after my 563, a space, and then that new page number before going on to my date of publication in the parentheses. This is the end of our mini lesson on Rules 15 and 16. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me or one of your TAs.